This podcast could potentially have adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly the possibility of sexual content. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Drinking with Authors. I'm your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today is the amazing Danielle Orsino, and our guest today is PC Nottingham. Woo!
Hey!
Woo! Welcome,
Thanks
PC.
for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Let's talk about what we're drinking. It's very important. I have my Star Wars cup. I am drinking, so I've decided a name for this earlier today, which is it's Starbucks Ortazzo chai tea latte mix and amaretto Baileys and cold brew and milk. So I'm calling it, instead of the dirty chai, the naughty chai, because I'm super excited about this.
Very nice.
Yes,
that's like fancy.
It's very, very yummy, and I wish it was much more fancy than it sounds. It's just like me in my kitchen, like a science experiment. Like
you have beakers going and everything else.
Yeah, it's mainly the espresso Baileys. Like, okay, what can I put on top of this so I can pretend it's a real drink? Danielle, what are you drinking?
Well, I guess great minds think alike, because I have a chai latte, just plain. But at least we're both chaiing it up.
Yes, I like the chai, and I like the Queen cup. That's nice. Of course. Nice. Yes, I know. In the Shira t-shirt, whatever.
And yes, you see, it's all working today.
I do. I noticed that. Okay, PC, what are you drinking?
So in honor of Four Horsemen, I have my horse beer, aka Rolling Rock. There's a horse on.
I love it. Okay. So for anybody out there who may not know you, what do you write?
Mostly science fiction for now. My debut space opera just released a few months ago, based on, depending on when you're listening to this, Mummified Moon, available from Four Horsemen Publications.
Very cool. Very cool. So we like to Scooby-Doo this and go back to, when did you decide you wanted to write, or how did your writing journey begin? Take us back in time, shall we?
If you can unearth my parents' Windows giant computer from back in the 90s, there's probably some Microsoft Word files of my very early attempts. Every couple of years I tried writing something. They went from like dumb short stories to slightly less dumb fan fiction. And then when I was in high school, I had this great English teacher who was very big into just keep writing. Your creative assignments can be as long as they need to be. And I turned one in, and then I realized I wanted to just keep going. So it was supposed to be like a 1-page assignment, turned into a 7-page one, and then it turned into a novel. And I thought I was being like super edgy, like the bad guy was the main character and he had no redeemable qualities, and it wasn't a very interesting story. And then pre-pandemic, a buddy of mine made up his own Dungeons and Dragons, not ripoff, but like a spinoff in the spirit of Dungeons and Dragons. And we made these characters and we played like 2 games. It was really fun. But then we never were able to keep going with it. And that really made me mad, because I liked the character I made. So I made a story around him, and I got its novel length. I was really proud of it. I workshopped it. And then I found an editor who was willing to do sample edits for free. And I sent him my prologue, and he sent me this very nice email about how awful it was and how I needed it.
This is not a fun journey. Why didn't we go on this journey?
I was going to say, we went left.
It has a happy ending. It has,
I was like, where are we going? I feel like we just hit a haunted forest or something, and not the cool kind. Okay.
I think it's better.
I believe you. We're holding on. Go ahead.
So this guy, he very graciously pointed out I was making every mistake. I started with a prologue for one, which is, tougher for a debut author to do. My characters, like half their dialogue was exclamation points when you first meet them. Lots of telling, very little showing, big fat info dumps. And then he directed me to the Brandon Sanderson's old YouTube channel. And that led me to Writing Excuses podcast. Sorry, I'm allowed to mention another podcast on here.
No,
Yeah.
please,
That's cool.
community, we share. Absolutely.
So they led me there, and then they were very big on like, you need to find other new writers who are at your level. So I did. I went online. I went through NaNoWriMo. I went through Scribophile, and I found a great community of other writers who wanted to write fantasy and sci-fi, and they have just been so amazing and awesome. And we've together just honed our crafts. And then after learning everything I did, I wrote another novel during the quarantine, and I knew it was just going to be a learning experience. So when I put it aside, I knew like I wasn't going to try anything with it. Then for a NaNoWriMo, I tried writing a middle grade novel, and I was so proud of it. I thought it was just going to be the next big thing. Queried it to death, nothing. And then I wrote Mummified Moon as just like an emotional escape from the hell of querying. And I knew it wasn't going to be like my main thing. I knew like this middle grade thing was going to be where I made my mark. And then I guess because I had less pressure on myself writing it, it was just better. And then before Elon Musk all over Twitter, there was one pitching contest where I just did a tweet pitch for Mummified Moon, and someone from Four Horsemen liked it, and then the rest is history. So it does have a happy ending.
Well, thank
Yay.
you. That was a story in and of itself, that journey. Didn't you feel like, Danielle, like we went
Yes,
through?
I felt like we went, yeah, that's why you're a storyteller. You see, it all comes around.
3-act structure.
An arc, and it's true. It was like a Pitman, right? That you were on.
Yeah, it was one of those like Twitter pitch
something.
contests.
Yeah, which are still fantastic. Elon, stop fucking with Twitter. So I think that's fantastic. So you're going through this journey, and what made you at the core of it go, I'm going to try to write a book and get it published? Like what? Like I know you talked a little bit about this, but you know, writing a book and writing stories and doing all that, there's a big jump because it's not an easy task to get published or be in the publishing world. So what caused you to go, I'm going to be a young adult, middle grade author in the world? Because that was the first superhero cape I feel like you kind of threw on. So
yeah, it was one of those things, like I just had this idea, and it is a good story. I understand now from like marketing reasons why it's kind of a hard sell. But I just knew that like there was something there. And I just did some reflection after the umpteenth queer rejection. Like, I want to keep trying, even though this is really frustrating. Because I did consider just throwing in the towel and just letting it be the hobby. But it probably sounds cheesy, but the other authors listening to this know, like, I felt like I owed it to the characters, as well as the characters I hadn't even thought up yet, to just try and get them out there, even if it took 20, 30 more years.
well, that's a journey. That's like an Odyssey type journey.
That's how it felt at querying. I do not.
Querying does feel like that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's really interesting. And why didn't you decide to go the self-publishing route? Because some authors get to that point, they've been on the show, we've talked to them, that went sort of the querying route like you did, and then went, fuck it, I'm going to self-publish. I'm going to do this myself.
Mostly money. Because I did consider it, but one of the people in my writing group is self-published. One of them, others are doing it now. But when she started talking about the cost, and when I doing research, there's so many things I knew I could never also get good at. I could never also get good enough at my own cover. I could never also get good enough at social media. The little things you don't think about, like the formatting, the legal stuff. I knew I could get really good at telling a story, but because I was passionate about it, the other things I have to pay people for, and with my job and my family, it just felt like too much of a monetary gamble that wouldn't be fair to them. If I had a really high paying job, or I didn't have a spouse and children to consider, I may have gone for it. But that was my, like, the economics and the finance of it. Like, I couldn't do it all myself. So I knew that part of being a self-publisher would mean that you would have to, like, basically run a small business, and that
Mhm.
just sucked all possible joy out of it for me.
That's a good point.
No, it makes sense. So now that you so we know about Four Horsemen. We talked about it on this podcast. You know, but Four Horsemen to series-based publishing. So now that you're going into your further books from book one, that was just a like, well, I'm gonna write this and it's gonna be cool. Has your writing journey changed at all?
A bit. So I was already kind of thinking of the sequel while I was writing the first one. And while I was writing the second one, which is done, by the way, I know my deadline's coming soon.
That wasn't a trick question. I was literally how
I
you
know.
described it.
I know. So I just started getting ideas for the next one, and writing the second one, ideas for the third started to germinate. So the trilogy's kind of been building itself. And there is a different, I don't know if pressure is the right word, but knowing that I do have a deadline is motivating me to write faster and just make sure that I'm using my writing time effectively.
And I think it does that. I think a lot of people do better under deadline. You know what I mean? Like they it's easier, whether it's a self-created deadline or a fan created deadline or a publisher created deadline. I think sometimes, because I feel like writing is one of the hobbies, or whatever you want to call it, that you can get interests. I want to use the word interest, right? Because I don't think it, just because it's a hobby, it doesn't mean it's frivolous. It just means it's something you like to do, that it's not necessarily your day job. I think it's something to easily give up and put other things in front of. I think it's one of the easier hobbies to go, I don't have time for that. You know what I mean? Like if you're a runner,
I'll do it later.
You tend to be like, I'm going to get up, I get myself on a running schedule. I think people getting themselves on a writing schedule does not always stick the way it does sometimes with other things. I don't know if you guys found that to be the case.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I definitely got to do everything before my kids get up and after they go to bed.
Well, no, I understand that too.
Yeah, so I wake up pretty early to get my author stuff done in the morning. And knowing I have this ticking time bomb that they might wake up any minute and demand a breakfast is a good motivator to make sure I get the words out fast.
Words, quick, adjective in here before kid comes in. So what was it like having your first book published?
Oh man, it was so surreal, so cool. Physically holding it in my hand and knowing that this was just a doc on a computer that I did while my kids were napping and sleeping, and now it's something other people can read, and these are other people reading it that are not in a critique group that are expecting a critique back. These are people who actually like paid money for it. It's indescribable. The imposter syndrome is there, but it's not as overwhelming as I guess I'd expected. But it's definitely slowly, like one thing at a time, just starting to feel more real as various little milestones happen and all that.
What do you mean milestones?
So I reached out to a friend that read an early draft way when I first was writing the pre-pandemic thing that an editor would tear apart, and she was very encouraging. So I reached back out to her and I said, hey, I kept trying at it, and here's a few of the same characters in a new universe, new story. And she was very supportive. But then she came back and said, hey, I'm in a book club. Do you want us to like read your book and then you can come with us? And I was like,
amazing.
Yes. So I just this week met with a book club, and they had all read my book, and one of them actually had the paperback there in her hands. And I signed it, and she was not a blood relative or someone I ever met before. So just seeing another person that's a stranger holding my book in their hands, that was just this amazing feeling. I was so happy to sign it. I was even dorky and like I had my Sharpie in my pocket just in case.
No, authors
That's
out there,
awesome.
carry your business card and carry your pens with
Sharpie.
you, because you never know when somebody's going to come up to you and ask for it. And we look silly if we're like, I don't have a pen, you know. So
Yeah, it was
Awesome.
it was really cool, and they were so nice. They all had, like, asked questions, and that was also interesting too. Like, it was very, very fresh in their minds, but I wrote this like 2 summers ago. So it wasn't as fresh in my head, and they were like asking me questions, and they were asking me about themes that they thought they found, and I was like, yes,
Yes.
that is a theme. Good for you for noticing.
Yep.
I talk
Did you
about this
find
on
that
this
some-
podcast all
Yep.
the time. Danielle, go for it. 'Cause
I was gonna say, like, did you find where they're like, did this character, did you mean that this was the metaphor for that? And you're like, yes, it was. Thank you. And then you're kind of like writing that answer on the side, like, yeah, okay, that's a really good thought. Hey,
Yeah.
okay.
it's
Yeah, we've had that.
fascinating because there are babies, there are works, we read over them so many times, you know, depending on who you are. I've heard people go through their manuscripts like 50 times. I don't do that. So
I do.
I would have like a completely different book if I went through it 50 times. I would have rewritten it like 5 times in between those 50 times. But you do that, you put it out, you're like, I know this story. And then especially when you're working on other works and stuff, people come up to you and you're like, did I write that? Like, and of course you can't say that because it's the author. They don't want to hear
Right.
you
Yeah.
going, what? That's what? Who are you talking about? Like, you're like, yes, all of that is true. That is what I intended. It is
Of course. I'm so smart.
it's a metaphor for life itself.
Yeah, sometimes they come up with better meanings than you do.
Yeah, they did. I was like, I wish I thought of that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, damn, that was good.
Oh my gosh, that reminded me of something that came up. Somebody brought this up to me today because apparently there's something going on, and this podcast is going to air a couple months from now, so hopefully this is dead news. But I thought it was interesting is they're now saying that the goblins in the Harry Potter thing are representing Jewish people or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm not even going to get into
Yeah,
J.K.
but
Rowling
yes,
because
get what you're
whatever.
saying.
But I just go, okay, people can take
This is a
any
new thing.
work and
Yep.
completely like strip it,
Mhm.
like strip mine it, and then even go like past the work level into some weird universe they've created on the work, right? Where you go, no, that wasn't a
That's
metaphor for
mm-mm.
that at all. Like,
No. Mm-mm. I'm
So-
lucky if I remember some of my characters' names sometimes, and I have an index, and I've had that happen where I was on an interview and they asked me about a character named Oberon, and I'm sitting there going, and I'm looking and I'm going, yeah, no, yeah. I hung up, I looked at my husband, I said, I got somebody named Oberon in my book, and he looked at me, he goes, the Polar Bear King, and I'm staring at him going, really? Are you sure? And he literally looked in the book, he goes, yeah, here you go, page this, and I'm like, damn, I totally forgot about him. And I was like, I don't know when he comes back. And he's like, I don't know, you haven't written about him. And I'm like, I should really bring that guy back because I totally forgot. And I had my husband knew who he was. And like I said, I have an index. I hadn't even written about him in the index. That's how much I forgot about him. But this person read it, remembered that character, and like had a whole thing about what they represented. And I was like, yeah, totally. Yep, you are. Wow, you picked that up. That was great. I hung up and I was like, I no idea who they're talking about, what they're talking about. Didn't know at all. They knew. And I had to go and double check it. And even when my husband brought it up, I was like, really? Damn. I'm like, okay. You never know. You never know what these characters mean to people either.
Well, and that's an interesting part of getting several books into a series because, we've got book 2 coming, PC from you, and book 3 and blah, blah, blah. But when you get to, where are you at? 8, 7? Where are we at, Danielle?
6 in the series, but 7 including the novella. So 6 is coming out in June, but 7 if we include the novella. Yeah,
we're including the novella. It's published, but the
Okay.
whole point is like 7 books in, and then you're like, Oh, polar bear character. That's a great idea. I should, you know?
Oh, blank.
Oh my gosh, that's hysterical. Question is, you are working on the series, but you had other things in mind. So what are your overall goals?
I'm not sure. Because the earlier one that I wrote, is I wrote a whole trilogy for this middle grade thing. I do like it. I think there is potential there, if it were just marketed the right way. But I also know that I need a different pen name. Excuse me, because it is a different audience, that, and the whole thought of like another website, another Twitter handle, another Instagram, another this, that like just makes you want to have an aneurysm. It's just getting on social media is so hard for me. That is definitely the biggest challenge I have. I try to make sure I do like a couple things on the different platforms each week. But so I do have that series ready to go, but a whole nother author persona on top of the one I have, that's my big holdup. But in the universe Mummified Moon is set in, I made a few things pretty open, so there is a lot of room for other characters and other points in history to jump in at, because it's set in a future where humans are like at the bottom of the pecking order of the various alien societies. So there's potential for first contacts, there's potential for prequel series, potential for sequel series. So there's a lot I could do within the mold I've created, even if it's not the other thing I thought was going to be my big ticket.
Well, the thing about doing a middle grade, well, it depends. The biggest thing with doing any younger under YA stuff, right, is what does your other books contain? Because a lot of times parents just sort of let their kids buy all the PC Nottingham books.
Yeah.
So what happens when they get these other books? That ends up being the big thing. But once you have a few books out and you're established, you can always do things like that, as long as you don't go, I'm going to write erotica or paranormal romance and middle grade books. Like,
Yeah,
that's where the lines get blurry. I think more and more authors are able to branch out into other things that they maybe weren't able to before, and streams can be crossed. Separate conversation, not on this podcast for you, but that is something that you could definitely look into. I just think it depends on the audience and where you're going with your other stuff. Not so much, I have to create this whole new thing. And I think it's something a lot of authors should think about. Also, when you create an audience for yourself, right? What can feed into that audience? We've had several authors on this podcast who are like, I publish anything I want to publish, right? Which is fine, but I go, you end up having to find people who really love your writing then, and not are stuck in a genre. Because if you write hometown romance, crime thriller, cozy mystery, like not everybody jumps into all those baskets necessarily. Like, so I think there's ways you could do it. What is something that surprised you about being published? What is something that you didn't, and besides the social media, we know that marketing, everybody says marketing. But what is something that surprised you that you weren't ready for when you got published, or, happy or whatever surprise?
So I ordered some books for myself, and I took them to a local bookstore, and I was all ready to like prove to them I wasn't a fraud. I wanted to make sure I had the hardcover because I had my headshot. I wore the same outfit I was wearing in my headshot because I just assumed, this person would look at me like you're just some yutz who's trying to, scam me or whatever. And this person was just very like acceptingly like, oh, okay, you're a person with a box of books. You're probably an author, and signed it. So I guess I was expecting to like have to haggle or something, or like prove that I was an author. But this person was just very, come on in, sure, we'll sell your stuff, put it on consignment. And I'm slowly trying to get around the area to all the local bookstores and see if I can do the same thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that, I love that you dressed up in the same outfit as your photo.
No, look, it's really me. It's really me.
I know.
Yeah.
I was ready to do
Danielle,
the side by side.
I want you from now on when you take your books to bookstores
I'm
to
just
do
gonna
the same outfit. I
with the
say that-
crown.
yeah, she dresses
course.
as one of the characters as her photo
Nice.
in the back. So I would love for her
I
to
should
come-
actually sit in the throne and have like somebody carry it in.
yes,
Trumpets
sit down and
announce
go,
me.
I am an author. You should stock
I'm
my
here.
books.
Stock them, peasant. I
I
shall sit
think-
here and wait.
But I think what you just said is so important in a way because it's part of the imposter syndrome. Like even though you have your books and they're real and you can order them and stuff like that, you still go, will somebody believe that I'm this thing? And will they give it validity that I'm a published author, that I'm with a publishing house or however you're published, it's part of, I think, some of the layers of it sinking in how that this is a real thing for you. Because you talked about like the first time you signed a book. I think for most of us as authors, that's huge. The first time somebody goes, here's a book, and not the first time you see a book and you're like, that's mine. You want me to sign it? It's very different than somebody going, here, will you sign my book? Right? Totally different, like, I don't know, feeling or whatever. What about reviews? Are you cyber stalking your reviews, PC?
I'm trying not, but I am.
I figured you were. So,
Yeah.
how's that going?
So there was on Goodreads, there was one 3-star review with no context. And that was just living rent free in my head, just like a little bug who just running around. And at the book club meeting, someone asked me if I was preyed upon by internet trolls because I have a sci-fi book and the main character is a woman. And I said no, but you know what? I've got one 3-star review with no context, and it's driving me bonkers. And then one of the women in the book club said, "Oh yeah, that was me." And I thought she was joking. So I started laughing. And then she was like, "Yeah, it says this, and this." And I was like, "Oh, you're being serious." And she said, "I did like it." And all of her criticism I felt were fairly valid. And I knew like she actually did like it because she was asking me about when the sequel was going to be ready and like what characters and elements are going to show up in future books. So somehow knowing she like actually did like it and had valid criticisms. She also said it was just like a personal preference. Like she said for her 3 is I'll keep reading the series, but I probably won't reread this again. Which I'll take.
Everybody's their own little special snowflake when it comes to reviewing things.
Yeah, and she was nice about it.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, it's just you just never quite know because you're trying to like. I hate it when people write it's not a review. What is it when they do the stars? What is that called? I keep forgetting.
The rating.
Yeah. Thank you. There's a lot more espresso in this family. So I don't know. Anyway, the rating, I hate this now because I feel like giving a rating to something, I think you should be allowed to give a 4 or 5-star rating to something, but if you go anything less, you need to do some splaining as to why you're going lower than that. Like, I just think that should be a requirement of every rating system on the planet because I would love to go, if you're going to rate, you have to review, but if you're going to go lower than a certain thing, you need to speak up because.
And it has to be legit. Like, really, it's got to be, like you have to really put it out there and make your argument.
Yeah, because.
Can't just be like, eh.
It sounds like she liked it, but it sounds like it's not her cup of tea. Don't review stuff if it's not your cup of tea. Don't rate
just
it,
walk
don't
away.
review it. Just like be done, whether you liked it or not. Not that anything she said wasn't valid.
Yeah.
But I feel like if it's not something that you normally read, or when you start reading it, you're like, this isn't the kind of book for me, then walk away. Any communication other than this is not my type of book, I just feel is invalid. Because
if it's not your thing, how can you
your
actually give critique on it?
Yeah. And I mean, the main thing, she was nice. Her explanation sounded to me like more like a 3.5 or a 4 than a
I was
than a
gonna
3.
say that sounds a little
But
better.
but I wasn't gonna split hairs, and it was on Goodreads, not Amazon, and I feel like on Goodreads people use it more like for their personal ranking than trying to sell it or not sell it to another person. So if it were on Amazon, I might have been a little more ticked, but it was on Goodreads, so I'm not. So I've
Stay
made my
off
peace.
Goodreads.
Yeah.
Don't go on Goodreads. Stay off there. Somebody told me once, they were like, going on Goodreads is like, imagine walking down the street and hearing what everybody thinks of what you're wearing. That's Goodreads. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh. I was like, wow. And he's like, yeah. He's like, that's how I think of it. He's like, just imagine being able to hear what everybody thinks about the way you're dressed, the way you look. He's like, unfiltered. And I was like, that's actually not a bad way. He's like, would you really want to know? I'm like, no. He's like, that's Goodreads. He's like, anybody can say anything. He's like, just like, as an author, stay off of it. He's like, because it doesn't, anybody can get on there. They don't have to buy the book. And I was like, that's a really
that's
good
true.
point.
I
And
mean,
I'm like, yeah.
I will
So.
say this for Goodreads, though, is that Amazon, for instance, it's funny because people talk about looking up their Amazon reviews, but they don't talk about going and looking up their Barnes and Noble reviews or their Kobo reviews, or, you know what I mean? Like, have you been on Audible to look at your Audible reviews? Like,
Yes,
yeah.
I do.
But
go
I'm
on
just
Audible.
saying that a lot of people, when they talk about
No.
reviews, it's interesting to me is they go Goodreads,
Amazon. Yep.
and there's all these other places you can look for your reviews.
Storygraph.
But you just got to, because Amazon now
Rabbit
does
hole.
not let you post if you are not a verified purchaser of the book.
Right. Yep.
So sometimes they slip through, but then they'll get rid of them. So if people didn't buy the book through Amazon, Goodreads is not a bad place for them to go get the reviews, but all reviews have to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt, because they're other people's opinions, craziness. So what have you set up for signings at any bookstores or anything like that to really solicit strange people to come up to you about your book?
No, not yet. I reached out to one library. I've been waiting to hear back. Still haven't heard anything, so I'm going to try another area library.
Yeah, I think that'll be. Did you practice your signature? You had your pen. Have you practiced your PC Nottingham signature?
Yes. I spent like a half hour one morning working on it, and I made sure I got my wife's approval for the one I chose.
I love that. You know what somebody said on a podcast? Was it yesterday or something like that? Sorry, my dog is breaking and entering. They said that you should date and put the location of where you signed your books. I never thought of this, but
yes,
if they get signed before you get super famous, when you get super famous, those books are worth a ton when they're signed with a date. And then somebody else mentioned doing the place. Like that, like you're at GalaxyCon 2022.
Who was that? Yeah, I remember we were on a podcast together when somebody was it the empathy guy who mentioned that too. I can't remember. It was somebody. Yeah,
I feel like it's a conglomeration. It's a conglomeration of humans, but I just thought that was interesting. So PC, since you're starting out, the next book, sign it with where you were in the date, because then
I like that. Yeah, that's cool.
They'll have it. How are you doing with like when you had that critique group and they were saying things, were you able to take what they were saying with a grain of salt? Or how did that affect you when you're listening to them critiquing your book?
So we did everything remotely through Discord. These are very close friends of mine that I've never met in person. Strangers on the internet. And we will share our files with each other. And what has helped a lot with for me is being able to see unnecessary words. I found that critiquing other people's stuff has made me a lot better, to the point where I almost feel like it's more valuable to critique something than to be critiqued yourself. because then when you're seeing what another person's doing well, you can kind of dissect why it's what good. And when you see someone do something not as pristine or something that's not as clear, you can kind of see it then in your own writing. Like in my writing group, the joke is that whenever someone writes the word that, I wake up and I gain power. That I'm gonna go seek it out and take that word out. So that's definitely been helpful. In terms of grains of salt, I found most of what they have said overall to be pretty valid and useful. And I tell them like only take like a third of what I say to heart. Like just take whatever of my suggestions that you think work and forget the rest. Because I don't want to write it for you and I don't want to, kidnap your voice. Yeah, everything they've had has been really helpful and very encouraging too, which is almost as important, especially when you're in the querying trenches and in drafting hell and that dreaded middle of the book.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. So what about your writing routine? What is that like? Describe to us your perfect non-child interfering writing environment.
Well, the child actually helped me write better. So I use this website called writeordie.com. And if you write, you set on your timer how long you have to write, and you set in your word count goal. And if you write too slowly, the screen turns red and it lets out this shrieking sound. So to teach myself to write as fast as possible in as short of time as possible, when our last kid, who was a pandemic baby, when she was a newborn and she could only sleep in this one bassinet in our living room, I would write on the table next to her. So if I did not write fast enough, I would wake up a very irritable newborn.
Oh, wow.
And
there you go.
I wrote a 100,000 word novel, first draft, in about a month and a half that way.
Oh my goodness. That is a very interesting approach. I haven't heard that one before. Like outside environmental ramifications from doing that.
Yeah, and then because I think like I'd rather write in those early mornings and then edit when I'm a little more awake and have had time to chew on the scene a little bit in my head. So write in the morning, then edit in the afternoon if I can, and edit after the kids go to bed if I can.
Very cool. What about music and stuff like that? Do you listen to music while you're writing, or?
So I outline pretty heavily, and I have either a playlist or an individual theme song for each character. If I'm really struggling, I might write while that's playing in the background. But if it's got lyrics and a very catchy tune, then I'm going to get distracted.
Sure, I end up singing along with it. I go into dance mode, go into dance revolution mode.
Yeah.
What are we doing? No, I'm supposed to be writing. Nope, I'm singing a pop song. Go team. Don't even know the words, making them up. Watermelon. So, with all that being said, so you said you outline. How big of an outline do you do?
I make a pretty thorough one on a spreadsheet. I do a mix of Save the Cat and a few other ones. So I'll try to have it pretty thoroughly outlined in terms of the whole plot, and then I'll outline the characters in terms of their personalities, values, backgrounds. I'll do a celebrity lookalike, and either a historical figure personality or someone I know personality, and just try to blend all those together. There's a website called Hero Forge that lets you make your own miniatures, and I'll do that to like get the character's outfit or any like weapons or gear they might have or any like facial features.
Cool.
So then that with a song, I have like not a mood board because it's not pretty enough, but just a jumble of little pieces about them that I can use to figure out like where the story's going from there. Because I like to think of each character as their own main character and them trying to drive the story themselves, even though they're not really, they think they are.
Do you keep a world book? Like, how do you keep track of when you're doing series writing? How do you keep track of what you said before? Obviously, unlike Danielle, who forgot about the Polar Bear King, how do you keep track of your stuff?
Spreadsheets mostly, and whenever I have to go back through the manuscript and figure out like which, because one of the characters in Mummified Moon, who's a big guy in the whole series, he is he's partially disabled. He's missing one of his arms, and for the life of me, I could never remember which arm. So then I realized once I was like constantly forgetting which arm he was missing, I just put it in his character sheet on the spreadsheet. And then I knew it was there as opposed to having to go all the way back to his first appearance. And doing little things like that, like he's got a scar there. This character is an orphan. This character is from this planet. Just if I've forgotten something, I have to look it up. Then I have to write it down, and that usually helps.
Now you could get called on any of the characters in any of the books and any of the metaphors at any time. No, just kidding. I kind of wonder as authors, how how to approach it. See, I cheat in a way because I write in modern. I don't write in fantasy or worlds like you guys. So I'm like, we can talk about Chicago because that's where I wrote that story. Go team. So, and I do that because I know my memory is not that great when it comes to that kind of stuff. So how do you remember all these pieces? Like, besides being there, if somebody's talking to you about your book or you're working on the next thing, are you able to remember a lot of the story to play it out, or do you have to reference a lot?
So like when I was just recently talking about it with the book club, I did remember the majority of it because it hasn't been that long since I've written it. And two, I've been working on pitching it. So when you pitch it, you're really getting the main like exciting pieces. So having the pitch pretty fresh in my head since I was, I'm trying to get it to bookstores and everything, that did make it a little easier. I think if someone had like something I wrote when I was a teenager, then I'd probably have a lot more difficulty. And I'm sure as I get older and publish more that it'll be more problematic. They'll just have to nod along.
Well, I think it also depends on how many times people bring up certain things, which I don't know, Danielle, because you're more books into this. Do people tend to bring up the same or similar things from the previous books to help your memory with that?
There's certain themes I think that come up continuously, but I also know that I think it also depends on if you love what you write. If you love what you write, you tend to remember those. You do remember more. I mean, polar bear aside, I do tend to remember, Oberon over there, and I'll never forget Oberon again. I do remember most of it because I do love the world. I want to live there. So I think it also comes down to if you love what you're writing, you do remember a lot of it. And I do. If somebody comes up to me and is like, hey, that crystal in this cave, then I'll probably be looking at him going, it's blue. Yes, it's blue because everything's blue. But I think you do remember it. And I try to listen to my audiobooks. If I find that like I'm really getting too far into something and I'm like, I don't really remember and I have to go talk, then I will go back and listen to it just to be like, okay, it's fresh. I got it. We're good. Or I'll go back to the index. That's why I keep the author index to kind of make sure I know what I'm doing.
That makes sense. Okay, Danielle, I'm going to let you give the final question, my darling, since I stole most of the screen time.
But that's quite all right. I'm good. PC, now that you're planning this this journey into serial series kind of thing, is there one character that stuck out that you were like, oh, I was going to kill them or I wasn't going to do anything with them, and now they've taken on a life of their own?
Yes, a character that she's the bad guy's assistant, and she's just very competent, and everybody just loves her. And that's been the feedback I got from my critique group when they read book one. They're like, we want more Amanda. And I have friends that are not part of a critique group, but they're part of a another podcast called Radio Free Write that I'll occasionally go on. If you like flash fiction, check them out, Radio Free Write. And they started reading the book. They're like, oh, we love Amanda. And then second book, my critique group's going through is like, we want more Amanda. So I was like, okay, well, fine. Book 3, she's gonna be the main character. And she was just kind of like the moral compass, conscience, Jiminy Cricket type to the bad guy. And she just didn't take any crap from anyone, and people liked her. So now she's the main character.
That's awesome. That's your Bob, right, Erica? That's what you always
Bob
call
the
him?
barista. I always call Bob the barista, which is this character you write in a book for whatever reason, plot point, whatever. But you're not like, this is a character that, is my thing. And then everybody's like, I love Bob. And you're like, what the actual fuck? Like, how did that happen? If you remember it, that's the fun part, is when they pick a super obscure character that you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Did I write that in the book? No. Of course, you never say that to a fan in a million years. If an author ever says that to you, slap them on the hand and tell them, bad author. We always need to fake it, even if we don't remember what you're talking about.
Will do.
Always.
Okay, so PC, shameless self-promotion time. Tell people how to find you on your socials and where to find your books and stuff.
Sure. So you can find my website, authorpcnottingham.com. You can find me at Twitter at Nottingham-PC. You can find me on the Instagram at PC Nottingham. And I'm on Facebook too, also as PC Nottingham. I try to post meaningful stuff. I do have a newsletter you can sign up for, where I will give you some exclusive content and some updates when new stuff's coming out.
Very cool. In the book?
Mummified Moon, available from Four Horsemen Publications.
And what is the name of the series? Because book 2 is coming out in the not
Yes. The series is the Earthquake War.
Very cool. It is so wonderful having you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Absolutely. Guys, this has been Drinking with Authors. I have been your host, Erica Lance. My co-host has been the amazing Danielle Orsino.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
And you can leave us a review. We love them. Just don't put just stars. You have to leave an actual review.
Yeah. Actually, write it out. Good or bad.
Write it down.
Just
I
write
want
it
to
out.
know what you're thinking. And we will see you guys next time.